Right. I think I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining me today. As mentioned earlier, my goal for this is to just give a short overview of our funding cycle and what Biolocity's programming looks like. And then I will leave hopefully a good 15 to 20 minutes at the end in case anyone's got specific questions for us. So I'll get started here. First of all, what is Biolocity? You may have heard of us before. We are a philanthropic program that sits between Georgia Tech and Emory. We're technically housed within the BME department, but our funding and resources are available across either campus. Our eligibility requires that the technologies that we support have to have IP that is held at least in part at Emory or Georgia Tech, and I'm happy to take some questions about details of that a little later on. So what do we fund? We like to say that we fund basically anything that affects human health. So that includes medical devices, health IT, diagnostic, tissue engineering products, drug delivery, or traditional therapeutics. So we've got a pretty broad scope and a team that we can kind of fit to each of these areas. So we try to support technologies across the range of development stages. And I would say our most well-known offering is the Biolocity Fund, which is what we're requesting proposals for currently. But we've also got some other programs that expand our support across different stages of the technology lifecycle. We've got what we call pro bono business consulting. This is an opportunity to sign up for a meeting with our team, which includes our experts and residents. And you can really do this at any stage of your development. If you're just at idea stage and you want to bounce some ideas off of us, we're happy to meet, develop a relationship before you might be ready for our funding. And that goes, kind of throughout the continuum of technology development. We also have a Bench to Market talk series. You can find information for this on our website. We collaborate with Georgia CTSA and the Petit Institute for Biosciences and Bioengineering, and bring in speakers on a variety of commercialization topics, regulatory, IP, reimbursement, kind of you name it. Each year it's a little different, but we try to kind of fill in the gaps that you might be wondering about technology commercialization. For some of our later stage teams, those who have spun out of the university, our newest program is Lab to Launch. I see Harry Gerard on the call today. Harry's our manager of the Lab to Launch program. This is specifically for Emory Technologies. This is housed within the new HSRB2 building, and it's a shared lab space incubator program for Emory Technologies. So feel free to hit up Harry if you've got questions about that opportunity. So here's a bit about our impact. We have been functioning in our current format since around 2015. Since that time, we have given away about 10.3 million in funding, and those projects have gone on to attract 137 million in follow-on funding. So while we are philanthropic, we're non-dilutive, we don't actually take equity in these companies. We like to keep track of that metric. We sort of refer to it as leverage on follow-on funding because it's a nice metric of how productive our companies have been in kind of getting to that next step of their journey outside of the university. We have 24 active startups, 2 licenses to industry right now, and 7 products that are actually on the market. So we're pretty proud of these numbers, and this is, I think, a reflection of kind of our whole process, which I'll get into a little bit later. Here's a bit about our team. So I'm John. I'm the associate director of the program. I run sort of the due diligence, market evaluation, and customer discovery efforts at the front end of our funding cycle, which helps to support the funding decisions. We have an oversight committee that actually votes on funding proposals. So that's largely an external body that ultimately makes funding decisions. The other half of my role is a project manager for all of our funded teams. I meet with them every couple of weeks and see what I can do to help them meet their milestone goals, as well as make any connections that might be necessary to consultants or other resources around campus. Our managing director is Dr. Courtney Law. She's been here since late 2020, I believe. So she oversees the Biolocity Fund as well as the Lab to Launch program that Harry Gerard runs. Our last team member, or core team member, I should say, is April Hurd, our program and operations manager, who helps all these programs run on time and really makes everything happen. Beyond our core team, we've got a bevy of consultants and experts in residence that form kind of a bespoke management team around each of our funded projects. So depending on your technology and the stage that you're at, we kind of pull on different parts of our network to get you the support that you need to get to that next step. All right, so we are officially opening our funding cycle for the fiscal year 24 through 25. So I will talk a little bit about what you can expect from our funding cycle. In general, we like to say that we have sort of a VC structured application process. There's multi-stages to our application and multiple pitch competition or pitch stages within that that allow us to reach our funding decisions. And the idea behind this is that by working with our teams early on, even before they apply, we can help them learn more about their technology, identify those killer experiments, those key milestones that are going to add value to their project, and then build a really feasible milestone plan so that ultimately, when you get to the end of our funding, you have a very feasible next step, whether that's an additional non-dilutive funding source or going out to seed investors, industry strategic arms, whatever it really takes to kind of accelerate your technology toward the market. Here's a bit about our timeline, so what you can expect. We are currently right at the beginning of our RFP release. So on our website, you can find a link to sign up to meet with us. That's kind of the first step in our application. It's just to meet with us, do a consultation, tell us about what you're working on. We'll be in this phase through early December, and we'll invite a subset of the teams that meet with us during this period to submit a pre-proposal in early January. So that's kind of the official start of our application process. After that, we will have a IP diligence phase where we meet with IP experts and make sure that there's at least a strategy in place for protecting the technology that's being proposed. And then we will move toward our pitches. So the first kind of cut that we make is our mini pitch. This is sort of like I guess you could call it an elevator pitch. It's a fairly short presentation, around 5 minutes, to our oversight committee with 10 minutes of Q&A. And after that, we'll vote on the projects that are moving forward to our full pitch in June. Between March and June, we are very hands-on with our applicant teams. We'll work with you to build a reasonable milestone plan and budget that accompanies that. And then you'll kind of synthesize that together into the full application document and do some practice pitches with our team before the final pitch in June. Again, pitching to our oversight committee, who will vote on the projects that will eventually receive funding. And then those projects will receive their funding and will start their projects in July of 2024. So a bit on our eligibility, and this information is on our website as well. We prefer that teams have 2 PIs, one that's kind of more on the technical scientific side of things, and then one who is in the clinical setting or can speak to the unmet need that you're working on. We find that's usually a productive mix of expertise. Often this shakes out that there's someone at Emory, someone at Georgia Tech, but there at least has to be one PI from one of those schools. You don't have to have both. But you do have, one of the PIs does have to be from either Georgia Tech or Emory. We also require that you've at least made a technology disclosure to either Emory or Georgia Tech technology transfer offices. You do not have to have a issued patent to be eligible for our funding, but ideally there's at least some kind of strategy in place, whether that's a provisional patent that's been filed, or maybe the university's decided to protect via copyright and trade secret. We at least just want you to have had that conversation so that we know that there's a plan to protect this technology. Beyond that, new applicants are really strongly encouraged to attend that Bench to Market talk series that I mentioned earlier. You can find registration links for those on our page. Many of these talks are virtual, some are in person, but I think that you can really get a lot out of learning about the commercialization process. How we evaluate technologies. So I've got a list here. I'm not going to rattle all of them off, but it really starts with this unmet clinical need and then kind of flows from there. We look at competition, we look at the market dynamics, IP, regulatory risk, and we'll bring in experts to help us evaluate all of these things as well. So this is kind of what our committee is thinking about when they're making funding decisions. So here's a bit on kind of what usually happens during a funding cycle. We meet with 50 to 60 teams who are interested in our funding. From there, maybe 25 or so are invited to submit a pre-proposal. A lot of the times this is based on the stage of technology. Maybe you're a little bit early. And in that case, we'd still, give you advice, invite you to come back. We're always happy to, have repeat customers, as we call it, people that come back to us as they continue to develop. But at any rate, we'll probably end up with somewhere around 25 in the pre-proposal phase that make it past our IP triage. Somewhere around 16 or so that make it to mini pitch, 10-ish that end up presenting at our final pitch in June, and we'll fund typically 5 or 6 projects per year. Occasionally, we have seed funding available as well. This is not something that you can apply directly for, but if, for example, you're one of these teams that it seems like a promising solution, a really clear unmet need, but maybe you just need a little bit of funding, earlier stage funding, to kind of get a proof of concept experiment done, we occasionally have seed funding available, but it's really kind of dependent on our budget from year to year. So it's very much on a case-by-case basis. And so this is what projects looks like with us. We're not just grant funders. We really see ourselves as a commercial accelerator program. So we work very closely with our teams to develop commercialization strategies. This could involve everything from intellectual property, regulatory strategy, reimbursement strategy, plain old financing. So where's your next bucket of money going to come from? We'll try to help you strategize that and identify key milestones, development milestones that you can work on with Biolocity funding that gets you closer to those goals. Like I said in the beginning, our goal is to build a bridge to the next step of your commercialization journey, instead of just a pier of kind of getting you to this funding and then sort of leaving you stranded at the end. So that's all I've got in terms of an overview of our program and kind of how we work. But I'm happy to take any questions. So yeah, let me know.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was wondering if I could start with the question, like, so you guys kind of have this funnel where you guys go through this process. I was wondering, what are some of the key sort of decision-making factors at each sort of these steps? So you have like the 50 teams and then the IP triage, that's pretty straightforward. But then going after that, like how do you kind of decide which of those 10 teams to move forward into the program? And then, how do you guys really evaluate which teams to fund out of those?
Sure. Yeah, great question. So I'd say our evaluation criteria on the right side sums it up pretty well. The one thing that I think is not clearly called out in this point, which we try to address up front, is the stage of the technology. So if it feels a little bit early to us, we might advise you to, if we have seed funding available, maybe it's a better mechanism for our seed fund. We might also suggest that you reach out to folks like Georgia Research Alliance to get some earlier translational funding. So that's I would say on the earlier side of things, a lot of it comes down to, is this the right time to fund? Occasionally, we have projects that are actually on the other end of that spectrum, where maybe they've already got a partnership with industry, or they've already incorporated a company and licensed IP out into the startup company. And that's a little bit too late for us. We can't fund actual startup companies because our funding is internal to Georgia Tech and Emory. So our sweet spot is kind of this like last bit of translational funding that's needed to kick out a technology and really spin it out into a well-supported company. But beyond the stage questions, what you're asking about is, at each of the pitches, how do decisions get made? And
Yeah.
I would say that's a pretty interactive process. So at each of our pitches, you're going to be pitching directly to the oversight committee. These folks, I can actually show you a little bit about what our oversight committee looks like. Some of them are venture capitalists. Some of them are industry leaders. We do have a couple of academic folks on here as well. And so it comes down to question and answer during this. Sometimes this might be, have you considered the regulatory strategy here? Or, oh, there's a really close competitor. How are you going to be differentiated from company XYZ or product XYZ? They might also ask you about the size of the patient population and how that relates to the eventual market opportunity. So it's kind of along any of those dimensions that we have listed in the evaluation criteria. And ultimately, we're trying to match up the most promising projects with the funding that we've got available each year. So sometimes it just comes down to sort of like with an NIH grant, there's kind of a funding line based on the number of votes that each project gets. And that varies a bit from year to year, depending on the funding we've got available. Did that make sense, or any other Questions
Yeah,
on that?
that really made sense. Yeah, that was really clear. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. And one comment additionally on that, you might have noticed I didn't put a like firm number on the budgets that we support. We don't have kind of a set dollar amount that we'll fund to, because we found in the past if you say X dollars, everyone is going to apply for exactly that amount. What we prefer to do is work with our teams, but between the mini pitch and the full pitch, and say, okay, what's the next key value inflection point? Is it a critical animal model that's sort of an industry standard in this space? Is it, maybe for our software teams, is it onboarding a first paying customer for a digital health solution? Is it even a prospective patient study that we could run at Emory or something like that would really lend credence to this technology? So we'll try to identify what that kind of killer experiment is, and then build a budget to reach that. So some projects are more expensive than others, and we just try to kind of fit that to what the funds that we've got available each year. So it's a little messy, but we try to, hopefully it's more of a kind of impactful approach that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess I have a software technology, so it would be great to have some money to do some of the validation experiments to show, at least in cells that we can, prove something better than the software out there right now.
Cool. Yeah.
Uh,
And I believe we have a meeting set up with you in the next few weeks, right?
Yeah, so I think it's in November. Yeah. So we
Okay.
can obviously talk more then about all the details.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for signing up.
Yeah, no problem.
Anything else?
So my question is more so related to being a student. I've
Mhm.
been working with EBCC since the past 2, 3 semesters, but I wanted to ask you about the internship opportunities for Biolocity. I don't know if this is relevant to the presentation here, though.
Yeah, so I'm happy to maybe take that conversation offline. Also, you're in luck. I have another info session this afternoon for specifically about the internship. I think that's sort of hosted within BME, but I'm happy to send you the Zoom link for that one
That would be great. Thank you.
if you want. Yeah, and I can talk more about it then. If you want to just shoot me a quick email just so I don't forget, and then I'll send you some info about that.
I'll do that. Thank you. Are you on the CC for the invite?
Probably. My email's also on like our website and stuff like that.
Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
Sounds great.
I think
Thank
it's
you.
J Nikosha 3. Yeah, at Georgia Tech. Or at GA Tech.
So I guess I can ask a couple questions. For the initial meeting, what are you, I guess, expecting the teams to bring, or what will the best information to present or discuss during that initial meeting?
Yeah, great question. So we ask that teams come to the first consultation with some kind of slide deck that gives an overview of the problem that you're trying to solve, the solution that you're proposing, and then any details that you have on the market, patient population, competition. So I would approach this as sort of an elevator pitch, even in the first consultation, just because that will give us kind of the broadest collection of information that we can to help you on whatever that next step is. So I would try to hit as much of these evaluation criteria as you can, but we'll be focusing on in that first consultation meeting. It's usually for an hour. Ideally, the presentation's only 10 minutes or so, and the rest of that time is just for discussion with us. So to prioritize, I would say the unmet need, and that includes like what solutions are already in the space. So like what is kind of broken about the way that patients are being treated in this area right now, and then your solution and any proof of concept data. I would say with the proof of concept data though, go light with that. We don't need to be inundated with technical details at this point. Like 1 or 2 pieces of data just to show proof of concept is sufficient on that side.
Right. And you mentioned that a lot of this, not a lot, but I mean, you said there is also a possibility of using these funds to potentially have almost like a mini clinical trial to advance the technology to the next level. Do you have like certain examples of, like, for example, do you guys also help technologies through like IRB approvals for human use or like go through the FDA clearance process?
FDA clearance is probably unlikely just due to the stage that we're at, but
Mhm,
many of our teams work on IRB approved protocols. So an
mhm,
example of that, we're currently funding a diagnostic technology, and they've done a lot of assay development in the lab and with some patient samples. And now we're funding a very small prospective patient study
mhm.
at Emory to that effect. So I wouldn't say that it's common that we'll have like a full-fledged clinical trial. That's much more expensive. It's kind of beyond our scope. But if it's that sort of first IRB approved study to show
Right,
that there's some humans translatability, within reason, I think that's a good use of our funds. But again, I would say for ballparks, I mean, we have, I think I have it on one of these slides, but each year we give away, we award a total of between 1 million and 1.5 million, usually over like 4 to 6 projects, just to give you a ballpark of like
right,
what depth of work we can support.
right. And this is for 1 year, right?
Yep, 12 months. Occasionally there's an opportunity for a no cost extension.
Okay,
But that would usually be if there were like unforeseen delays or administrative stuff or things like that. So we try to keep it to 12 months as much as possible. Yeah.
okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, we've got a few minutes left. Any other questions? What I will do for the student that asked about the internship, as well as for anyone else that's got any other questions, I'm just going to put my email in the chat. And you can feel free to follow up with me afterwards in case you've got other questions. All right. Well, not seeing anything else, I'll go ahead and wrap this up. In general, this is one of my favorite times of the year. I love seeing what everyone is working on around campus, even if it's really early stage and you just kind of want to bounce ideas off of us. Please sign up for a meeting request form. In fact, since we have some time, if you give me a minute, I can also just put that in the chat here so that you can look at our meeting request form. Let's see. And this is kind of the first step in our process as well. So yeah, please reach out. We'd love to hear what you're working on. And like I said, even if you're not a great fit for us at this stage, we can hopefully suggest some other resources around campus or on both campuses that could be a better fit for you. And if nothing else, we'd love to, to start to develop that relationship. And over the years, maybe that'd be something where we could work together. So yeah, thanks for attending. Feel free to hit me up if you've got any other questions. And yeah, have a great day.